doubt he believes there was a cover-up, and the BBC's failure to investigate its own behaviour and to report the reports that were in the newspapers and so on is definitely classed as a cover-up. And this is the most serious aspect of this report, in my view.
Martin Bashir says the use of fake bank statements had no bearing on Princess Diana's personal choice to take part. British women affected by the PIP breast implant scandal have welcomed a French ruling that more than 2,500 victims are to get compensation. The implants were filled with cheap industrial-grade silicone and huge numbers ruptured. West Midlands police say a newborn baby has died after being found in a canal in Walsall. The force says its priority is now to find his mother to make sure she's okay, describing the incident as tragic. It's thought more parts of Scotland could be put under stricter COVID rules. Cases have risen in both East Renfrewshire and Midlothian. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed up 69 points at 70.19. The pound buys $1.41 and €1.16. LBC weather: coastal gales and strong winds in the south and southwest tonight. Rain for most areas. Tomorrow, the wet and windy weather continues. Feeling cool with highs ranging from 8 to 13 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Andy Ivey.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. 4 minutes past 9 is the time on LBC. Again, you can watch us on Global Player or on the LBC YouTube channel, Facebook page or Twitter feed. And you can take part in the programme because we are in the company of Alastair Campbell. It's a long time, actually, since we've done one of these, isn't it?
Is it?
In my first few years on LBC, I think you were sort of in here all the time.
I've never been in here in this swanky new studio.
It's a very lovely new studio, isn't it?
Very swanky.
And we're here because you have published your 8th volume of diaries, which cover the period 2010 to 2015. And I've said before that I think they get more entertaining and interesting and emotional the longer you go on. I mean, obviously the political diaries when you were with Tony Blair in Downing Street were absolutely fascinating. But this period, it's dominated in a way, as the previous diaries were, by your own mental health. You talk a lot about your family as well. And, of course, Ed Miliband's leadership of the Labour Party. And, of course, there's a major section on the night that you stood in for me on LBC.
Oh, major section.
That's right. Obviously a seminal moment in your life. What reaction have you had to this volume? Because it is, I think, slightly different to the others in some ways.
It's interesting you say that. I mean, you're not the first person to say that, but you're the first person who said it quite so sort of volubly. I remember you sent me a message after you read them as saying that you kind of an elongated version of what you've just said. I think that Fiona's reaction was interesting. She said that, my partner, she thought that I was just ill all the time in these diaries, whereas I've not been ill during lockdown. And whether that's to do with being under less stress than I was then. I think what you're feeling there, the volume before, volume 7, you and I have pretty much talked about every volume.
Yes.
I think volume 7...
I regard it as therapy.
Well, that's good. It's definitely therapy for me. Don't worry about that. But I think then my head was slightly coming out of the kind of the feeling that was between a kind of rock and a hard place all the time. And I think with this one, I am starting to breathe a bit more. And therefore, I'm maybe a bit more reflective and a bit more personal, I guess. And also, they've got this other sort of storyline. I mean, I hate to say storyline, but you know what I mean. It was my son, Callum, developing alcoholism as well. And then the thing with Ed Miliband, I hadn't even noticed until one of the reviews pointed out that it kind of starts with me agonising about not getting involved with David Miliband. And the very last word is David Miliband saying to me, well, it was always going to end like this. And that kind of family drama going through the whole thing is quite interesting as well.
I can remember in one of the first interviews I did with you, maybe in 2011, 2012, suggesting to you that you ought to become an MP. Mm-hmm. And that's another theme.
And you've suggested it many times since.
I have suggested it many times since. And it's quite interesting to read now your thought processes and how it really, at one stage, certainly 2012, 2013, it was one of the dominating things that you were thinking about. And indeed Fiona as well. Yeah. And of course, I knew what the outcome was, but I was still kind of willing you to think, go on, do it.
I know, and it's funny, because I was up in Burnley last night for the football. And
bad luck.
Yeah, no, it wasn't great. Well, we played well, actually, the first 20 minutes. But there was a couple of people up there who were, even now saying, look, Labour's in a mess, you've got to get back in, you've got to get involved. And, I haven't really moved on from that discussion of a decade ago, where it's one of those things that I think I should, at some level, but there's a bigger part of me that kind of doesn't want to and can't quite face it. I remember, I think there's the lunch with David Ginola, the footballer, where he saw me on French television saying that I know I'll go to my grave regretting that I never did it myself. And, I was always kind of the guy behind the scenes, as it were, and I should have got a seat. And he phoned me up because we played football together in a charity thing, and he's a really good bloke. And he said, I want to have lunch with you, I want to talk to you. And he said, so we had lunch in a restaurant in Baker Street, and he said, look, if you know you're going to regret something, it's obvious what you have to do. You have to do it to avoid the regret. I said, yeah, but I also know that I'll regret it if I do it. And I've always felt that conflict. I remember Tony Blair once said to me about somebody else, not about me, but he said somebody had been in touch with him and said, I'm thinking about becoming an MP, trying to get a seat. And Tony said, if you think you're thinking about it, you're not going to do it. So there's something that holds me back.
But, I mean, a lot of people were saying to you in this period, look, Ed Miliband's not going to win the election, it's not going well. If you get in, you could become the leader of the Labour Party very, very quickly. Now, obviously,
easy to say, isn't it?
Well, it is easy to say, and it's flattering for the ego and all the rest of it. But if you had done it, would that have been what you would have wanted to do? And if so, do you think you would have been good at it?
Well, I think if it was so, then I would have gone for it. And I think maybe the thing that's holding me back, or has held me back, is actually a doubt about whether that would be the case. I used to look at Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, actually, when he was Chancellor. And I used to, and I would often, this will sound a bit kind of, boastful, but I would often sit with ministers and sometimes prime ministers from other countries and really people in big positions, and I think, God, they're not up to much. I could do that job.
We all think that.
Yeah, okay, we might all think that.
Yeah.
But I would look at Tony and I'd look at Gordon and I think, no, I couldn't do what they're doing right now. So there was something held me back. Something held me back.
But you have leadership qualities, don't you, though? Because, I mean, whenever I announce that you're coming on the programme, you see what people say on Twitter, and people either love you or hate you. But you are, I think, a leader. You are somebody that if you were going into a battle, you'd want you alongside you. And I think that is something that very few political leaders have nowadays. They don't have that ability to inspire people to follow them. I mean, we'll talk about the Labour Party. In fact, I'm going to leave it to callers to talk about that, because I think we'll get lots of calls on that. We are going to take calls, by the way, 0345 6060 973. But there must be part of you that thinks, well, I could have done a more decent job than maybe the people who've been doing it for the last 10 years.
Yeah, there might be a bit of that. But then the next thought is, well, so what? Because you didn't do it. And you could argue, I think Tony Blair was a extraordinary leader, somebody of real political and intellectual skills, and really delivered a lot for the country. I think Gordon had phenomenal strengths, but maybe found the Prime Minister bit, having to do the whole thing, maybe harder than he thought he would when he was Chancellor, and I think he was, pretty good, really good Chancellor. And then Ed, I think, it comes through in the diaries when I'm preparing, when I'm debating with Ed, when I'm David Cameron to his Ed, preparing for the TV debates, and, I'm sort of, partly it's me battering him because I'm saying, do this better than you're doing it.
Because when you talk about it, I mean, clearly when you're writing a diary, it is contemporaneous. I mean, there are a few bits where you wait a few days or maybe a couple of weeks for whatever reason, but it's in the raw. But be honest with me, were there bits you thought, no, I can't say that about him, I've got to take that out? Must have been.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably. There was one of the debates when it was up in Derbyshire, I think it was, and we were at this big house and we were doing it, and I left in such a state of sort of agitation and, and anger. Because I just felt it wasn't. But, as you know, and to be fair to Ed, he held his own in this. But I always felt it was a really big mistake not to defend the New Labour record. And I felt it was a tactical consideration that became a real problem. Now, he still doesn't agree with that, which is fair enough, he's entitled to it. And he did go for it, and he did win, and you've got to, fair play.
You mean he won the leadership contest?
He won the leadership, yeah. So he put his head right above the parapet and he went for it. But I found that was really, really difficult for me because, and I think that Ed thought it was an ego vanity thing that why aren't you defending all the great things we did? But it wasn't. It was like, you have to, you can't just emerge out of a clear blue sky and be saying that you're doing something completely different. You've got to have a sense
and
of
effectively
past.
He did what you accuse Cameron of doing all the time, not having a strategy, just being tactical.
I think he did have a strategy, but I don't think it was rooted in something that he should have been projecting as having been a successful period in government. I do think with Cameron that he confused strategy and tactics, and I think that led to Brexit, and we are where we are.
Let's change the subject a moment, because a lot of the book is about mental health, your own mental health, but also your son Callum and your daughter Grace. Now, Callum's alcoholism was a huge issue for you, wasn't it? Because obviously you could, I suppose, as a father, you could see your own life playing out again in some ways. And there are some hugely emotional chapters or passages in this book, which anyone reading it can't fail to get emotional. And I suppose because I know you a bit, I kind of felt it maybe more than a normal reader. And I mean, you would literally be in tears sometimes for half an hour because of a conversation that you'd had with him where he failed to understand your viewpoint and just didn't think he had a problem.
It's hard. It's one of the hardest things we've ever been through, both Fiona and I, because I had been through a drink problem and sort of come through it fine, but I found myself making a lot of the same mistakes that people made with me. You do find yourself saying, you don't need to go to the pub, why are you going out? Why did you drink? And it's pointless doing that. And it was really, 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 really hard. Some what sleepless nights are like when you literally cannot sleep because you're worrying about something. And, Callum would be out and we wouldn't know where he was. And there was one night I described in the book where I wouldn't, my own psychiatrist that I'm seeing for my depression. By the way, I don't want to give the sense of a complete basket case family. We're
Alastair, all families are.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that is the point. But so I'm seeing my psychiatrist about my depression, and to be fair to him, David, the psychiatrist, said, "Look, I think I need to see Fiona because we talk a lot about her. I'd like to meet your children because we talk a lot about them, and I really think it'd be good if you could bring Tony and Gordon along one day." Because we talk about them a lot as well. But no, he said about Callum, he said, look, you're falling between two stools. On the one hand, he's affecting you very, very deeply. He's affecting you both. You're really, really worried. You're not sleeping, etc. On the other hand, you're giving him messages which enable his behaviour. And I guess he was leading us towards saying, you've got to do the tough love thing. And I did the tough love thing, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done when I locked him out. When he came home drunk and he'd lost his keys and he'd lost his phone, and I said, you know the rules, you can't come in. And I locked him out, and I just collapsed on the floor, I thought, and, people can... I can say that now and say, oh, well, it worked because he hasn't had a drink for 8 years and he went into rehab and et cetera, et cetera. But, he could have fallen in the canal. He could have been knocked over by a bus. So, it's hard. I think anybody who's dealt with... I found it much, much, much harder, Callum's alcoholism, than when I had a problem. Much harder.
And, alcoholics will never say that they've recovered, but you just said he's in a good place now. Well,
he's in a better place. He's not touched a drink for 8 years, and he's very active in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he's got a good job, and all three of the kids, you always worry about them, and because I guess with what I realised with me when I had my breakdown in the 80s and I was diagnosed as having a drink problem and I stopped drinking, But then all the issues kept coming back. So there's the stuff that makes you the addict in the first place. There's kind of stuff that you have to wrestle with. And maybe back to the early part of the discussion, maybe that is... I mean, I don't feel remotely ashamed of anything to do that goes on inside my head, and I don't feel the stigma that a lot of people feel. But I guess the other thing that maybe holds me back on the politics is that I know that I've broken before, and I know I've been close to it.
And frankly, the life of a politician
It's horrible.
It could well hasten that.
I think I
suspect the little voice at the back of your head.
I think he might be saying that, and I think Fiona's saying that as well. Yeah. You know what it is. And it's interesting, when Fiona nearly went for a seat, we both nearly went for it at the same time. I actually pulled out first. It was Ed. Ed said to me, "Listen, if you want to get the selection in Burnley, we'll stop it being an all-women shortlist and you can go for it now." And I thought about it and I pulled out. I just thought, I'm not right for this. There was something holding me back. And then Fiona was still going for Hampstead. And she woke up in the middle of the night and she sort of woke me up. She said, why am I doing this? Why are we doing this? When we think what it's done to us before. And she's now a lot more relaxed with being out of it than I am. I'm still kind of wrestling with it the whole time. She's right out.
Well, you can't leave it alone, can you, basically? I mean, the Brexit referendum, obviously this book doesn't cover that period.
Well, it covers the catastrophic error that led to it.
Let's not even go there. Let's have a break. 18 minutes past 9.
LBC.
The title.
Iain Dale on LBC.
21 minutes past 9. Alastair Campbell is with us. We'll take your calls in a moment. Paul from Bedford said, please tell Alastair he was brilliant presenting Good Morning Britain, the best since Piers. He should get the job permanently. Well, my spies tell me that you're being invited back.
I'm going back in early July.
Did you like it?
I did enjoy it, yeah. Yeah, very tiring. I mean, I was knackered by the end of it, but yeah, I did enjoy it.
I watched you on the first day. I actually used the ITV app, the hub, which I've never used before. Obsequious interview with John Burko, though.
That was day 2.
Or was it day 2? All right.
Maybe a bit soft, yeah.
But I said to someone the other day, they were saying that they thought you should get the job permanently. And I said, well, and you'll hate this, but I said, well, if they want the nearest thing to Piers Morgan, then they probably should go for him.
Oh, sod off. I mean,
No, I mean that in a positive way.
Yeah, but
in that you can mix it up a bit with politicians if you want to. You can say things which will horrify the voice in your ear from time to time.
I like sport. I like culture.
Yeah, so I just think it's.
Yeah, but I wouldn't do. I think Piers, what he does, and will continue to do whatever guys he stakes out a position and then goes completely over the top.
Yeah,
right? I'm over.
You go over the top anyway.
Exactly, and then I just stay there.
Yeah, but we won't talk about Brexit any longer. A lot of people also, and I think you mentioned this a couple of times in the book, they say to you, you need to have a big job. Now, I think you've got one, actually. It's not like running a big organisation, but what you've done on mental health, I can't think of anybody in this country who has sort of ratcheted up mental health on the agenda any more than you have. And I think that is kind of almost your mission now, isn't it?
I feel that I do something on it every day. I've done a couple of events today online to do with mental health. Yeah, I feel that, and it's I don't know if you heard earlier, Owen Patterson on the Jeremy Vine show talking about the suicide of his wife. He and I are doing stuff together now on suicide prevention. I do feel that, yeah, I don't feel it's a job. I'm not going to get paid, and but a lot of the stuff that I do to make money is so that I can fund the time that I spend, doing the mental health thing. Yeah, the mental health thing is really, really important to me, and I do think it goes back to this about why I've not done the kind of classic political route. I think that the skills that I've got and the experience I've got in politics and strategy and campaigning and government, I guess, I think lend itself to that sense of this is somewhere where I can really make a difference. And the other book, I put 2 books out during lockdown. The other one was a book about depression. And that's had a big impact, not least the chapter that Fiona wrote about living with me when I'm depressed.
Well, I remember we did an hour with you two together, didn't we?
Right, yeah. And, she's had an amazing response to that. And she's now set this online group up. People.
But it's so important, though. I mean, I said to you before we started, are you okay talking about Callum? And I think it's really good that he's okay talking.
Yeah, I did. He was one of the few people that I sent the diaries to and said, read it. If there's anything you don't like, just put a red pen through it. And he didn't take anything out. He was fine about it. Well, not fine, but he said that's what it happened. Just go with it.
We will talk a little bit about Labour before we come to the calls, and I promise we will do that in a second. What happened at Christmas that turned Keir Starmer into a threat to the Tories, to somebody who's now they think of as a bit of a laughingstock?
I think they'd be foolish to think that, if that's what they think. It's a very good question, though, because I think that I guess that what happened was his big point when he arrived, he wasn't Corbyn, and I think put to one side the Labour Party die-hard Corbyn supporters who can see no wrong in him. I think for a large part of the population who want the Labour Party to do well and want the strong opposition and want the Labour Party to become a government, I think they went, phew. We've got somebody back who we could imagine in Downing Street. He's serious, he's sensible, he's mainstream, etc. I think that a combination of things have just reduced his impact. One that he keeps going on about, I think a bit too much actually, this thing that COVID has made it very difficult to get out and about and meet people and so forth. I think if you're a top flight politician, you can always get out and about, not least by coming and sitting and talking to you. You can connect with the public. It's about the message, and I think what's happened is that the Labour Party has been a little bit too static for about a year. COVID, Brexit, I think disabling themselves on Brexit by backing the deal was actually a mistake. I think that it means that now that I think Brexit's going wrong in all sorts of places, they just don't want to talk about it, and I think that's a mistake. And I think maybe, I talked about earlier about, how hard it is, and even something like Gordon with all his experience, when he got to the top, it was like, oh, this is really quite difficult. And I think we underestimate that. But I still think Keir's got a lot of strength and a lot of qualities. In a funny sort of way, I hope the Tories think that, because I think that might be a bit of a mistake.
Do you not think that, and I really don't want to get into Brexit, but you do not think that his own track record on Brexit will always be held against him by a lot of people in the seats that he has to win back next time from the Tories, the seats that the Tories will want?
I really don't. I think that is such a sort of Westminster thing. I mean, the problem with Keir out in some of those seats is they don't know who he is. The idea that they're all going around saying, "Oh, he was a big Brexiteer," the Tories want to put that line against him. Look, that UK and a Changing Europe are doing these interviews with everybody involved in the Brexit debate. Mine is up this week, and I'm proud to say it's the only one with a language warning, because I really say what I think. But I make the point that actually it was. I can't stop laughing when I hear them project Keir as this great Remainer. He was the one who sat in my kitchen and said, "Why are you wasting your time with this People's Vote campaign? It's just not going to happen." He wasn't kind of out there championing.
Well, he was right on that.
Well, we lost, but we got close. And if the SNP and the Lib Dems hadn't fallen into Johnson's trap in the election, I still think we could have won it.
We shall never know. One
never
of
know.
the great counterfactuals. Right, do you want to put your headphones on?
Yeah, sure.
Let's go to Matt, who's in Cambridge. Hello, Matt.
Good evening, Alistair. I'm loving how honest you're being tonight and just open about everything. So one question I had was, I just wanted to know, how do you sleep at night knowing that your actions led to the death of millions of Iraqis, children, civilians, and I just don't know. How do you sleep at night?
It's not the question that you said you're going to ask, is it, Matt?
Well, I wouldn't worry about that. Listen, Matt, well done for getting through. Well done for asking the question. Well done for your nice, polite, softly spoken start. I sleep very well, thank you very much, not least because I know that despite people like you pumping out your conspiracy theories day after day after day, sensible, intelligent people who've investigated every single aspect of that episode, including in 6 inquiries to which I've given evidence, have found no evidence of wrongdoing on my part. So you sleep well with your conspiracy theories and I'll sleep well with my principles.
There's always one. Let's go to the news. It's 9:30. Andy Ivey has the headlines.
Israel and Hamas have agreed to a ceasefire following 11 days of fighting. It's expected to come into force at midnight UK time. Israel's been attacking targets in the Gaza Strip while Palestinian militants have fired thousands of rockets at Israel. The BBC has apologised after an independent report found journalist Martin Bashir used deceitful behaviour to secure his Panorama interview with Princess Diana in 1995. The broadcaster is also facing criticism for the way it looked into his actions and has written to the royal family. The number of cases of the Indian coronavirus variant found in the UK has risen to more than 3,400. Surge testing is underway in a number of areas. LBC weather, coastal gales and strong winds in the south and southwest tonight. Rain for most areas. Tomorrow, the wet and windy weather continues. It'll feel cool, with highs ranging from 8 to 13 degrees.
This is LBC. This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's 9:34. Alastair Campbell with us. You can watch us on the LBC YouTube channel, Facebook
Twitter
feed, and Twitter feed, and on Global Player. Right, we've got lots of calls coming in. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to ask Alastair a question. Let's go to Jake in Orpington. Jake, hi, what would you like to say?
Evening, Ian, and evening, Alastair. I'm an alcoholic, but I don't know which is the best way to go, either to like a wellbeing cause or to Alcoholics Anonymous. And yeah, I've been, clean for about, 4 weeks tomorrow. So I'm really nervous about doing either of the two, but which would be the best?
Why are you nervous?
Because obviously I'm confronting something that's, it's had a hold over me for quite a long time. And I just get a bit nervous with certain things and going into certain situations, and my circuit board, my head is not wired the right way. Not to say that I'm a lunatic or a danger to anyone, it's just my way of thinking. It's not like, most people's. So I just get a little bit apprehensive and a little bit sort of like my back's up against the wall because I'm
you stop. Tell me why you stopped drinking.
Well, I stopped drinking because my life was just becoming a mess. It was just a mess. I mean,
you recognise that then?
I've been around the block more times than most people, Alastair, and I'm only 44, and I don't really want to particularly go into it, but I've been around the block more times than most people who go around in 3 or 4 lifetimes. But
listen, you've made that first big step, though, haven't you? You've recognised yourself that you've got a problem, and you've managed to go a month without a drink. And I would, in answer to the specific question,
with my head. Sorry.
No, you're saying, go to AA. I mean, obviously, I don't know you other than this very brief chat, but go to AA or go to see somebody. I mean, you've made a massive step in what you've done. And
I don't drink I can't just have one drink, because it used to annoy me when you used to be able to go to the pub and you'd be standing there and the fella at the end of the bar would take about 3 hours to finish a pint, and then I'm thinking, why can he do that and I can't just have one drink? And that's the fundamental problem for me. I can't just have one drink. So for me, it's either all or nothing. If that makes any sense,
It makes total sense. Alastair and I were talking in the break about betting, and I said, well, the reason I never bet is because I know that if I did, I'd probably easily become addicted to it and wouldn't be able to stop. And it's exactly the same with you, Jake. But you have recognised that in the way that I recognised it. So the question is, Alastair, though, which of the different organisations should he go to?
Well, listen, it obviously depends on the individual, what works for them, but I would give them all a go. I would maybe go to an AA meeting. Callum, my son, he goes to AA quite a lot, and he's become quite a regular, and he also chairs meetings, and he gets a lot out of it. And when he was in rehab, actually, Fiona, my partner, and I, we went to one of the AA meetings, and we also went to Al-Anon, which is for families of alcoholics. And you definitely get something out of that group sense of people sharing the same problem. But I'll tell you the other thing I did when I was stopping drinking, Jay, and I didn't touch it for 13 and a half years, and I fell off the wagon in the most bizarre circumstances. We don't need to go there, but
let's.
No, we don't. In volume something or other. And but I used to do this thing. I was a massive cricket fan when I was a kid, and Jeff Boycott. I mean, obviously he's not my hero now because he's a massive Brexiteer, but he was my hero as a child.
So intolerant.
And I used to go to.
Why can't we all just get along,
bed.
Alastair?
I used to go to bed every night, and I would pretend I was Jeff Boycott, and I'd just ground out another run, and I was Richie Benno and Jim Laker, the commentator. Yeah, exactly. I was just grinding it out, and I'd say, what, Jay? Every single day that you go without a drink, you just need to give yourself a massive pat on the back, and you just build that, and you build it, and you build it, and you get through an hour, you get through a day, you get through a week, you get through a month. That day at the time thing is so powerful when you get into it psychologically. And then in the meantime, I think you go to these other organisations and other people, and ask them ask them what help can they give you to help you, build that sort of big score and
also, I
keep
guess
going.
talking to people in a similar circumstance is actually... you're not alone. I mean, there are lots of other people going through this as well.
Well, the genius of AA, and I often think Bill and Bob, the two guys who started AA in America, I mean, what the impact they've had on the world. They just started a really small self-help group, and it's grown into something where you go pretty much anywhere in the world you can find an AA group.
And when you've been to these groups, do you sort of notice people sort of nudging each other, saying, "See who's over there, Alastair"?
Yeah, but I don't go now. But I mean, yeah, it's like George Best said. How can you go to Alcoholics Anonymous and be anonymous when you know George Best? But listen, I know lots of really well-known people who go to AA, and they don't. I think there is something really sort of collegiate and wonderful about it. So I would say, Jake, definitely give that a go.
Okay. Jake, thanks for phoning in. Let's go to James in Gillingham. Hello, James.
Hello, Ian, and it's very nice to be on the show again. I think last week I was talking to my good friend John Apter.
I remember you now.
Yes, and I just listened to your previous caller and just want to say, if he's listening, I'm rooting for him, okay? That he finds the help that he needs to get him through these problems that he has.
Well done you. I think everybody listening would hopefully concur with that. Right, what would you like to ask Alastair, James?
Alastair, it's very nice to speak to someone who was around when we had a Labour government. Right. Now, I've been a Labour man for nearly 44 years, okay? And I've lost my hair. So, now, I understand that politics can be quite fickle at times. You win some, you lose some. There are defeats and there are victories. Now, we've got the Batley and Spen by-election coming up, as you know, and obviously the seat's been vacated because our good friend Tracy Brabin was elected Mayor of West Yorkshire. Should the party follow Diane Abbott's advice in that if the Labour Party is not successful in keeping that seat, they should get rid of the leader?
Look, I think that it's not...
Just remind me, did Diane Abbott have that advice when Trudy Harrison won the Copeland by-election, which had been a Labour seat?
I very much doubt it, but anyway.
She's on cross-question on Monday, so I'll ask her.
Okay. Look, I think that what I'd really love to happen is for Keir and the Labour Party to have an agenda of policy and big arguments about the future that is so kind of compelling and so big that it gets above all this stuff and this sort of soap operatics. And, I'm here because Ian wanted to talk to me about the book, and I'm always willing to sort of, give my opinions and everything. But I always do yearn, for a time when actually there is a new generation of people who are coming on who you guys just want on the airwaves the whole time, that it's not about, Tony Blair, me, Peter Mandelson, all the kind of old guard. But I think one of the reasons why we keep getting trotted out is because we did win the only three of the last 11 elections.
I mean, Mandelson put it very well the day after the elections at the beginning of the month, didn't he? When he just said, if you go back through elections...
Hold on, Ian, before you even finish that sentence, it's a direct lift from that book that is sitting right next to you in the introduction.
I was just about to give you the opportunity. Or just to remind listeners, when he just said, if you go from 1979, lose, 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 lose... Blair, 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 lose, lose.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, that ought to say something, even to the most virulent Corbynista.
Well, it's like Brendan Foster, the athletics guy and the BBC guy, is a really good bloke, a good friend of mine. And I remember when there was a time when, I was getting kicked out of the Labour Party, Tony Blair was persona non grata, who cares what he thinks kind of thing. And Brendan said, this is like Man United fans never wanting to hear about the Alex Ferguson era. It's sort of, but that's what it's like. And that's what happens, I think, when parties lose touch with the public. Now, as we saw from the first caller, there are people around who absolutely despise me, despise Tony because of Iraq, and fine, let them despise away. But actually, when we talk about learning lessons of the past, you've got to learn lessons about how we won. And I'm not saying, by the way, that you rerun the New Labour playbook and I'm not saying go back. I'm saying go forward with a strategy and policy that is rooted in what's happening in the world now, today. And too much of the policy debate on both sides is, I feel like we're stuck in Brexit's about the past, really. And, the Labour Party, are we going to be Corbynista? Are we going to be Blairite? Well, let's be neither. Let's have an agenda for the future that is rooted in what's actually happening in the world now.
So your answer to James's question is no?
The answer is no, yeah.
Are you friends with Peter Mandelson again?
Yeah.
You sort of in this book.
It's quite tricky. But yeah. No, Peter and I will. Whoever dies first will definitely be at the funeral.
And have you had a word with Tony Blair about his new haircut?
I did. I did it live on television.
Did you?
Yes, I did. I raised it with him on Good Morning Britain.
And he said, I wasn't watching that bit.
Okay, well, no, I'll tell you what he said when I first raised it with him, which was not on television. He actually said, Alastair, I've met quite a few people who really quite like it. I said, Tony, I want to meet these people because they're not in my circles. To be fair, though, it was one of the best talking points of the last sort of few months, wasn't it?
My first thought was, how could Cherie let him do it?
Well, I asked him about that, and he said that, because I said, look, Fiona cut my hair 3 times in lockdown. Surely Cherie could have cut it. He said, listen, you know Cherie well enough. I don't work around my neck with scissors.
A friend of mine has just WhatsApped me. Says, as a Tory Brexiteer, if Alastair Campbell became Labour leader, I would lend my vote to Labour for the first time ever. Ooh. There's always one. It's 9:45.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Tom Swarbrick.
Princess Diana was deceived into giving a bombshell interview to Martin Bashir, with the BBC accused of a subsequent cover-up. Her brother says he draws a line between that interview and her death. Do you?
Tom Swarbrick on LBC.
I want
Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
It's 9:48, and believe me, you won't want to go anywhere at 10 o'clock because Tom Swarbrick follows me, and all I can tell you is that there has been a statement from the Duke of Cambridge, Prince William, which is embargoed until 10 o'clock. And suffice to say, you will want to keep listening to that. That's all I can say. I've probably said too much already. Alastair Campbell is with me, taking your calls. A text from Wayne in Tooting. Can you ask Alastair about, I don't know how you pronounce this, PSILOCYBN.
Psilocybin.
That's the one. And psychedelics in treating depression. Has he seen the trials and evidence? What does he think?
I've not seen the documentary, but I saw that when I was doing the BBC documentary, then my book on depression, I went to see a guy called Ian Roulier in Watford, who was a really nice guy, and a doctor called Ros Watts, who was on this psilocybin trial, which is basically the ingredients of magic mushrooms. And I've also been involved with this DMT, which is a new psychedelic treatment for depression. And look, I'm somebody who's a bit like you with gambling, and me with like gambling. I've never taken illegal drugs.
Me neither. We're
never.
So square, aren't we?
Absolutely. And I'm worried. But so I find it amazing that I've become quite interested in this whole psychedelic thing. And what I saw with Ian, I mean, it was terrible to watch because he went through this treatment under very controlled conditions, and then he was depression free for several months. And then because it's a Class A drug, it was a trial. He had to come off the trial, and he was straight back onto the the lot of it. And this DMT one is interesting because it's like you take one dose, again in supervision, plus therapy. And the people who are running it, they are very, very excited about it. And, the medication for mental illness has not really moved on for a generation. So, it's interesting.
Right, let's go to Mark in Sevenoaks. Hello, Mark.
Hi. Will Brexiters believe that a vote for Labour is a vote to reverse Brexit?
I don't think so, no. I mean, part of me wishes that it did, but I don't think so. I think Keir Starmer's made it pretty clear that they're not going back on that one. Now, I think the next generation actually will rise up against it because I think you see so much that's going wrong. I think, for me, the Northern Ireland situation alone is such a disaster. I think that you see now with the farmers look like they're going to get thrown under the bus with the Australian trade deal. I think the fishermen are already being sold out. I think you can go sector by sector. I saw a thing today about the number of financial industry jobs that have already gone to Paris and Frankfurt. There's a lot of bad stuff happening, but the Labour Party voted for the deal, and I don't think that. So no is the sad answer.
Are you back in the Labour Party?
No.
Is that because they haven't allowed you back, or you just?
I haven't applied, and I mean the ban for my heinous sin of defending what became their policy on Brexit is that I think it's a 5-year ban. And look, both Keir and when he was Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell said just apply and they'll let you back in. But I'm not desperate.
It's quite an advantage being outside a political party, isn't it? It gives you a bit more credibility as a commentator.
Well, I mean, Fiona is not. She resigned before I was kicked out, mainly over the anti-Semitism stuff. And she's got no desire to go back in either. And she's been in the Labour Party longer than I have.
Right, let's go to Martin in Doncaster. Hello, Martin.
Hi, Alastair. Do you think, unless the hard left are kicked out of the Labour Party, we're going to be unelectable? Because to see Jeremy Corbyn and Diane Abbott, Clive Lewis and Bergen and that criticise Starmer after what they've done to the party, they have destroyed the Labour Party. I voted the other week. One of my neighbours is an ex-miner, and he voted Conservative, and I'm not being disrespectful. I just don't. I know people have the different views, but I just don't understand why after. What? It's like the last 12 months. I think where Sir Keir has got it wrong, he hasn't criticised Boris Johnson. When I see people like Andrew Bridgen and I think it's Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown, lavish praise on Boris Johnson for the last 12 months and how he's handled this pandemic, it makes me cringe. We've lost.
Well, I feel. Look, I think it was difficult for Keir. You come along, you've got these two big things, Brexit and COVID. I do think on both he's been a little bit too forgiving of Johnson. I think I was really disappointed that they voted for the Brexit deal. I think that was a mistake. And I also think that on COVID, look, yes, the vaccination program's been a great success, and thank God for that. But so many terrible mistakes were made in the early days of this, and I don't think Keir's been nearly tough enough. And I completely agree with you. I mean, the idea that we lost, we wouldn't have lost Hartlepool if Labour had put forward the platform that was rejected in 2019 and 2017 is just, and that's what I meant about earlier. Somebody sent me this quote the other day from Bobby Kennedy. He said, "If you're not, if nobody's in your way, it means you're not going anywhere. You've got to have arguments. You've got to take people on, and you've got to defeat them in argument." And so, I mean, kick them out of the party is maybe too strong a way to put it, but I think you cannot allow this narrative to develop that Labour needs to sort of go back to the policies and the politics that have been defeated twice.
But you know that you can tell an awful lot about a politician by the way they react to adversity, and particularly when you lose an election. And do you think that Keir Starmer's horrible few days after the May elections were partly down to the fact that he actually hasn't got a political background, that he came into politics relatively late, and he hasn't got that knowledge of his party? And if he had, he wouldn't have treated Angela Rayner like he did. He wouldn't have done a reshuffle, which appeared to blame Valerie Vaz for the whole election debacle on the Thursday.
I don't think it did, but
he only got rid of two people. She was one of them.
Well, he obviously wanted to move a lot more people.
Yeah, well, exactly. So why bother doing it in the end?
Well, because it became a show of strength, and I think he probably made the judgment that, having this phase of his leadership defined by an all-out battle with the elected deputy was probably not a sensible thing to do. Look, I don't know the full inside story, but I had a sense right from the word go that, I've been involved in lots and lots of reshuffles. They're really difficult because you are dealing with egos and you are dealing with people's lives and livelihoods. And, we would never have done a reshuffle without getting John Prescott on board for it. The broad parameters. Once the little jobs here and there, fine, but, you get him on board. And I think what happened is because he wanted, for, reasons that he's absolutely entitled to have, wanted to have somebody else doing the party chair job, therefore had to move Angela to somebody else. It is clear that not long after that conversation, word gets out that he's sacked her, and that defines the what you call the horrible few days.
Well, that's exactly what happened, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right, a text here, anonymous. I'm a barrister and suffer from poor mental health, and in particular anxiety exacerbated by pressure and stress caused by my job. Sometimes judicial and collegiate bullying is harmful too. I'm from a working class background, and so I don't fit the mould, which is pointed out a lot. What advice would Alastair have? In particular, how did he deal with the pressures of his job in Number 10 when he had the weight of the world on his shoulders and people always looking to trip him up or do him down? I'd like to stay anonymous because barristers can't talk openly about their weaknesses.
Well, I know quite a few barristers, and I think that, look, what I would say to you, I think you're better than they are. I've always felt that, particularly in those, politics is still quite a class-bound sort of world, right? And I think that where people are trying to put you down, I think it says something about them rather than you. So I would just be yourself. I think that if you've got anxiety and you've identified that that's what you have, then I would, a bit like talking to Jake earlier, go and see somebody that can help you work that through, and you'd be amazed how much help you can get. And look, I'm hoping you're, reasonably well-paid barrister. You might have a long wait if you go in the NHS, but I'd go and find yourself somebody that you can talk it through with. And I think maybe it's something I learned at university, actually. I went to Cambridge, and there were lots of these people there from schools like Johnson and these lot went to. And I was just absolutely determined never, ever to feel in any sense inferior to them, because that is what they wanted you to feel.
I grew up near Cambridge, and I vowed I was never going to go there. I don't think I'd have got in even if I'd applied. But I'm coincidentally speaking at the Cambridge Union tomorrow night being interviewed by Roger Mosey, of all people. So I'm rather looking forward to that. This is from Ian in Ramsgate. He says, what a refreshingly honest interview. If only Alastair would run as an MP, any party, and inspire others. Inspire other ministers to be as honest and admit to being human. Great interview. Our time is nearly up. I'd better mention the title of the book again, haven't I?
Volume 8, Rise and Fall of the Olympic Spirit. We haven't even covered the rise and fall of the Olympic spirit.
Well, we haven't actually, no.
Tessa Jowell, 3 years dead this week.
That is astonishing to learn, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Because...
But I do think we've lost the Olympic spirit. I really do.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
But we will always remember what it was, won't we? Because that was a very, very...
It was amazing. It was fantastic, and he felt really proud to be British. And I don't feel proud to be British when I'm abroad now. I was doing a Canadian TV interview the other day, and they said, we're going to introduce you as Alastair Campbell, Tony Blair's former advisor, and a British author and strategist. And I found myself instinctively saying, do you mind saying Scottish?
Really?
I did, yeah.
It sound very Scottish, but I know you play the bagpipes, which feature a lot in the diaries. Right, that is me done for another week. Thank you very much, Alastair. I'll be back on Monday. Remember, Cross Question now 3 times a week. Starting next Monday, we have Diane Abbott and Brandon Lewis on the first edition. I'll be back on Monday from 7. Coming up at 1, it's Darren Adam. But next, Tom Swarbrick.
Iain, thank you very much. Yes, evening all. Welcome to the show. Tonight at 10.
I think it's a difficult day for the BBC. It's a dark day for the BBC. We pride ourselves on truth, impartiality and the quality of our journalism.
The BBC apologises after a report found that Princess Diana was deceived into giving a bombshell interview.
Do you think Mrs. Parker Bowles was a factor in the breakdown of your marriage?
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
The now disgraced journalist Martin Bashir apologises after forging